Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor, please subscribe if you haven't already. Listen up, because it's time for a new episode of Rock and Read. Today, you're going to hear Chapter 9 of Set the Night on Fire by the lead guitarist of the Doors, Robby Krieger. Let's get into it. A devout Buddhist once approached me, positive that he had deciphered the secret meaning behind Light My Fire. It's the fire that burns in your third eye. I said, "You're right, man." Jim always told me not to tell people the meaning behind my lyrics. Let them interpret it. Sometimes they'll come up with a better idea than you had. The third eye concept wasn't what I intended, but it's my favorite interpretation so far. When the Doors first started, we only had a few songs from the original demo and a few others we were working on. Our live set was mostly rounded out with covers. Gloria by them, Don't Fight It by Wilson Pickett, and our own version of John Hammond Jr.'s version of Willie Dixon's Backdoor Man. Jim encouraged the rest of us to bring in some lyrics because we didn't have enough original material, and he didn't want the sole responsibility for songwriting on his shoulders. This is a crucial detail about Jim Morrison that often gets lost in discussions about our band. Many people think of Jim as an author who came in with fully formed ideas and fearlessly captained the creative process. I don't want to take one shred of credit away from Jim's massive contributions. I want to give him additional credit for being a true collaborator. He never let his ego claim the territory of main songwriter. He was never so precious with his words that we couldn't offer lyrical input, and we enthusiastically welcomed his invaluable ideas for musical hooks and melodies. On the majority of our albums, the songwriting is credited to the Doors rather than any of us as individuals. That was Jim's idea, long before any of our singles made a splash. Even though he likely stood to make more money by crediting himself as the main lyricist, he thought it was important that we remain united and not squabble over the genetic makeup of every single song. Even on later albums, where songwriting credits are listed individually, we still split the money evenly among all four of us. Jim always wanted what was best for the Doors as a whole. When Jim tasked us all with bringing in original material, though, I was the only one who gave it a shot. Jim always talked about using universal themes in his lyrics that would stand the test of time and speak to people of the past, present, and future equally. It occurred to me that there was nothing more universal than the four elements: earth, air, water, fire. There it was, the element that could warm you or burn you. The stuff of ancient Greek myths, a metaphor for love and lust, or a sly reference to lighting a joint. The Rolling Stones had previously cracked the Billboard Top 100 with a song I liked called Play with Fire, so I figured I was on the right track. I sat in my room strumming my Gibson SG Special with the Stones song on in the background and tossed around phrases until finally it clicked. Light my fire. I was still gathering my lyrical confidence, so I only managed to put together a verse and a chorus. Musically, though, I wanted to show off a little. Standard rock songs generally used only 3 chords. I decided I would try to use every chord I knew. I started off with G, D, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, and A, but I worried about going overboard, especially with the flat chords that were so rarely used in rock and roll. I pared down the verse to something simpler. A sus2 to F sharp minor, and back again. Everyone who covers the song always plays some form of an A minor instead of that A sus2, because Ray's organ part fills in the notes I'm not playing and creates an aural illusion. A small but perfect example of why the Doors worked best as an ensemble. I kept the chorus simple too, using a classic G-A-D progression, but I couldn't resist throwing in a B7 and an E7 to at least keep it interesting. The next day, I sang and played my new song for the band. Jim came up with the second verse about the funeral pyre. I poked fun at him for always wanting to write about that, but Ray loved it. It's cool. It covers the whole spectrum of getting higher and going lower. Jim's other stroke of genius was changing the last line of the chorus. Originally, it was just the phrase, "Come on baby, light my fire," 3 times in a row, but Jim suggested a simple but effective change. Try to set the night on fire. While I had originally written the tune with a folk sensibility, John gave the song much-needed dynamics, with a Latin-inspired rhythm that built a sultry mood during the verse and offered rock and roll release during the chorus. Later, he would put a rim shot crack at the beginning, starting the song on the 4 rather than the 1, which was another simple but essential contribution. As Ray and I struggled with a way to get from the solo back to the verse, I took the opportunity to throw in all the original chords I had been so worried about, even those poor overlooked flats. The whole composition ended up unintentionally walking a wobbly line between what's technically called a circle of fifths and a circle of fourths. It was a rarity at the time to construct a pop song that way. The end result sounds deceptively simple, but when you include the A minor 7 and B minor 7 that form the bedrock of the solo section, it adds up to a total of 13 unique chords. I'm glad I didn't know more about music theory at the time, otherwise I might not have had the guts to break the rules. Ray's famous organ intro was the final piece of the puzzle, but originally it wasn't an intro at all. It was part of the transition from the solo to the verse. While Oliver Stone's movie The Doors shows Ray creating it in a matter of minutes, he actually spent months gradually perfecting the version you now hear on the record. And it was our producer, Paul Rothschild, who had the vision to suggest that we use that transitional part as both an intro and an outro. If you listen to our live recordings from the Matrix in San Francisco, you can hear the original arrangement, and you can wonder, like I do sometimes, how different life would have been for the Doors if Paul hadn't made that formative suggestion, or if Ray's mom hadn't forced him to take all those classical piano lessons before going out to play basketball. The solo section of the song evolved on its own as we played it live, and engaged in free-form jazz experimentation to fill out our early sets. We all idolized John Coltrane as the ultimate musician. Whatever the chords were at the foundation of a song, Coltrane could play any note at any time at any speed over them and make it sound right. He wasn't bound by scales or modes. He found freedom between the staves. So we used his version of My Favorite Things as a jumping off point and tried to see how far out we could go before getting lost. Since I could never hope to come close to Coltrane's abilities, I hedged my bets by taking influences from Indian music as well. Nearly every night I would fall asleep listening to Ravi Shankar's In London album. I burned his long ragas into my brain and infused our jazz solos with Indian scales and licks. Some nights our experiments were more successful than others, but the solo section is what allowed the song to live beyond what you hear on the record. It's impossible to calculate how many times I've performed Light My Fire, both during and since my time with the Doors, but I've never played the same solo twice. Anyone who has ever heard the song live has experienced their own unique version of it, created by the specific chemistry of the musicians on stage and shaped uniquely by the moment. Once Light My Fire was released into the world, it became an entity. A year after our version hit the charts, a blind guitarist I had never heard of, named Jose Feliciano, released a classical acoustic cover. It became his highest charting song in the United States, and it charted even higher than our version in several countries. I didn't like Jose's version at first. It lacked Ray's trademark organ intro and Jim's trademark howl. It was more easy listening than rock and roll, but the closer I listened to it, the more I appreciated his masterful playing, and I've come to truly love it over the years. The success of Jose's version on the heels of the success of our version turned Light My Fire into a standard, which is when a song becomes so widespread that it's part of an unofficial songbook that all musicians are expected to know. Its pervasiveness really hit me when at some point in the 70s I was riding an elevator in an office building and a Muzak version of the song came through the speakers. I remember thinking, oh, we made it to the elevator. It has been heartening, though, to hear Light My Fire covered by dozens of artists over the years across a vast array of genres. Stevie Wonder, Al Green, Etta James, Johnny Mathis, Booker T and the MGs, Nigel Kennedy and the Prague Symphony Orchestra, Minnie Riperton, Alicia Keys, Shirley Bassey, UB40, Isaac Hayes, Massive Attack, Nancy Sinatra, Nina Hagen, Jackie Wilson, The Ventures, The Guess Who, Martha and the Vandellas, Boots Randolph, Mae West, Rick Moranis, The Beastie Boys, and fittingly, Ananda Shankar, Ravi's nephew. All of them found interesting and creative ways to make the song their own. As a result, Light My Fire has become more financially valuable than all the other songs the Doors ever wrote, combined. Do I ever regret not taking sole songwriting credit? Not for a minute. Well, I suppose. We all have those dark and greedy minutes sometimes, right? But even though it's technically considered my song, it's indisputable that without Ray, Jim, John, and Paul Rothchild giving it lift, it never would have made it into orbit. And considering what money can do to a young band, Jim's suggestion of an equal split likely saved us from an early greed-based breakup. It was in the end what was best for the Doors. In the late 80s, I was finally introduced to Jose Feliciano backstage at a taping of the Pat Sajak show. I said, "Thanks for doing my song." He replied, "Thanks for writing it." "Why don't you do another one of our songs?" I joked. "How about Touch Me?" In response, he grabbed his guitar and effortlessly belted out a perfect, graceful Latin arrangement of Touch Me. It turned out he was planning to record a cover of the song at some point, but for one reason or another, it unfortunately never happened. Apparently, he was a much bigger Doors fan than I realized. No matter how long you live or what paths you've chosen, life will always surprise you. I never could have envisioned the journey my song would take when I first sat down in my room to answer Jim's songwriting challenge, and I still marvel at something Paul Rothchild pointed out about it. So many of the cover versions don't bother with the organ intro or the solo or any of the other elements that made up the original. They all survive off the strength of three simple words: Light My Fire. It's almost impossible to believe that somehow in the entire history of music, no one had thought to put those three particular words together until a 20-year-old from Pacific Palisades stumbled onto the idea. It's a constant reminder that music is infinite, and there is always something new to discover. There are three words out there right now just waiting to be strung together into a brand new phrase for a brand new song. There is freedom to be found between the staves. Pick up an instrument, find your three words. Well, chapter 9 is over. Let me know what you thought of this chapter in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.